Hello, my name is Mr. Fotheringham and I'm second in humanities. I'm going to take this opportunity just to talk to you about how fantastic history is at OIEA. I'm going to tell you what we study, why study history in the first place, and where it can lead to. So to start with, I'm just going to sort of look at why study history in the first place. I've picked out two quotes from a couple of famous people. And it sort of really sums up just why history is just so important still in the 21st century. So the first one is from somebody called Michael Crichton, and he was the person that wrote the Jurassic Park novels. And he says this, he says, if you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree. And I think that's really important, because it's basically saying that, you know, in order to fully understand who we are and to fully understand, you know, why society is the way that it is and why the world is the way that it is, we've got to look back. We've got to be able to understand, you know, what's happened before us in history. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it, really, from Michael. The second quote is from somebody called Nelson Mandela. You might know who he was. And he says that the purpose of studying history is not to deride human action, nor to weep over it or to hate it, but it's to understand it. So it's not to sort of ridicule it or to be sad over it or to hate it, but it's to understand, you know, what it was like, and to understand what societies were like, and to understand why people did what they did. And by doing all that, and by understanding the past, Nelson Mandela says that, and hopefully then to learn from it as we contemplate our future. So perhaps, you know, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past, that, you know, by sort of understanding and by sort of looking at what had happened previously, so that we don't make those same mistakes. And I thought those two quotes really sum up quite nicely, really, just the importance of history. So what do we study at OIEA? So we have, there's four topics that we study at GCSE, and not only are they fun, but they're, you know, they're interesting, they're engaging, but again, look at not only history that's occurred in this country, but also around the world as well. So you're going to get a really good in-depth knowledge and breadth knowledge of lots and lots of different sort of aspects of history. So the first topic that we look at is medicine in Britain from 1250 to the present day. And this is a really nice topic. Students in the past have really enjoyed this, because you get to see what happens over a really long period of time and just how far we've come in terms of our medical knowledge and our understanding. But also it's like, you know, the sort of the weird and wonderful sort of treatments and preventions that people thought about, and why people thought those things. So our first unit, like I said, is medicine in Britain, and it's split up into four key topics. So the first one is the first topic that we look at is during the medieval period. So we look at the causes, preventions and treatments there, and the case study there is the Black Death. So a really interesting topic. You know, students really enjoy the fact that they can sort of really look at what medicine was like during the medieval period, but thinking about why did they think like that at the time? And it's just, you know, perhaps so alien for them to think today we've come so far, but actually we didn't always think like this. You know, we didn't always know about germs, we didn't know about DNA and how that can affect things. So it's really interesting to actually look back and think about how actually people thought caused diseases and things like that in the medieval period. And then basically it just goes through chronologically. So then we look at the Renaissance period, and again we look at those changes and continuities that occur there. And our case study is the Great Plague, so another epidemic. Key topic 3 is then we look at the industrial period, and this is a period where lots and lots of changes occur. So this is where, you know, germs are discovered, and vaccinations. And the fact that actually, to start with, people didn't want to have vaccinations because they thought that they were going to turn into an animal or something. So it was a really interesting time period, and lots of changes occur. So again, it's getting students to really sort of investigate about why those changes occurred and the impact that had on our lives today, really. Again, we look at a case study in that topic, and we look at cholera. So we look at a case study in London, and think about why, what happened in London and why so many people died of cholera. And it wasn't until an investigation took place that they actually figured that it was a water pump that was infected by a sort of a toilet, a cesspit that was right next to it. So again, it's just a really interesting sort of a way of getting the students to think about not only how people lived their lives back then, but also how they try to deal with issues, and especially one that was cholera, cholera, and it did affect a lot of people. We then look at medicine in the modern day. So again, we look at things like DNA and the discovery of that, and how, again, that's had an effect on medicine and our lives. We look at a case study where we look at how the government has dealt with things like lung cancer and how they've really tried to affect and had an impact on our health. And then the last key topic on medicine is really sort of focusing on injuries and treatments during the First World War. So we really get to grips and really sort of get involved with looking at the trenches and how that warfare was carried out. It was the first, perhaps, the first industrial scale war where we had artillery shells and machine guns and tanks, and all this had an effect on new injuries, new types of injuries, but also new treatments had to be created and developed. So we look at things like plastic surgery, we look at shell shock and how that was dealt with during those times. We look at things like trench foot, so where your foot swelled up and things, and what that could lead to. And we also look at the different sort of the stages of evacuation as well, and how they sort of dealt with such a scale of injuries, that they'd never seen before and never dealt with before. So this topic, this unit is really, really interesting and really fun, and like I said, the students really can get into grips with those changes and those sort of key moments really that occur throughout the different time periods. Our second and third unit make up paper 2, and again, some really sort of different topics here that students can get involved in and get engaged with. So the first one that we look at for paper 2 is the American West. So it's just looking at a really short sort of time span from 1835 to 1895, but it's a key sort of change that occurs in America in terms of how the Native Americans, so the Plains Indians, how their lives changed, and how the white settlers, how they sort of went westwards. So we're looking at conflicts there, we're looking at law and order, so things like Billy the Kid, the Battle of Little Bighorn, cattle ranching, the American Civil War, all these things that we can investigate and go through. And it all culminates with the extermination of the buffalo and how that sort of impacts the Plains Indians' way of life. So obviously, like I said before, it's a really, really interesting topic, and we've gone for quite a varied topics as well, to sort of really sort of look at different aspects and different time periods. Our next unit is looking at early Elizabethan England. So again, it's a short time span, just from 1558 to 1588. But again, some key developing moments that occurred during Elizabeth I's reign. So we start off by looking at the problems that she faced when she became queen. So it was quite a turbulent time before she became queen, with her father Henry VIII changing religion, and then Bloody Mary changing the religion back. This all created lots and lots of problems that we sort of go into and look at for when Elizabeth comes to the throne, and how she dealt with them. So, for example, we look at how she dealt with her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. We look at the plots, there were many, many plots where people tried to have Elizabeth murdered, and we look at why and how she was successful in stopping those from happening. We look at the Spanish Armada as well. So King Philip of Spain thought that this single woman that was running the country thought that he could quite easily take control. So he sent the Spanish Armada in, and obviously he was quite surprised and quite shocked when she actually defeated the Spanish Armada. So a great moment in history for her. We also then look at Elizabethan society. So again, we can sort of look at how different society was back then. So we look at their leisure activities and just see how different, for example, football was. I mean, football in Elizabethan England could be quite deadly. There was no time limit. It could last several hours, but also people could get murdered on the pitch if they did something wrong. So there was no refs and no yellow red cards. It could be quite a violent sport. We also look at Elizabethan education, and again looking at how different it was back then to what it was like, what it's like today. And we look at a time of exploration. So we look at key people like Sir Francis Drake and how he circumnavigated, how he went round the globe, which was a huge achievement back then. And Sir Walter Raleigh, and how they tried to colonise parts of America, just to show sort of how strong Elizabeth I was. And perhaps one of the most, I'd probably say the most popular of the topics that we cover, lots and lots of students like this, is our last topic, which is on Weimar and Nazi Germany from 1918 to 1939. So this topic starts off with the end of the First World War, and obviously Germany losing, and we look at the legacy that creates for Germany. So they have to sign the Treaty of Versailles and all the problems and challenges that creates. So we look at how Germany develops over that sort of period of losing the First World War, how it tried to recover during the 1920s. So we look at changes in society. But along with that, we then look at sort of Hitler's rise to power. How does this man with so many horrific ideas, how does he actually, take control over a country, and how does he become chancellor? So we really delve into that, and we really look into that. And this module really sort of look at historical sources and historical interpretations. So sort of historians' opinions, to really delve into some of these really key sort of questions that come out of this. We then look at once Hitler becomes chancellor, how he then becomes a dictator. So how does he create a police state? How does he get rid of all his opposition? And why is there very little opposition and resistance to him and the Nazis? And then we look at life in Nazi Germany. So how do the Nazis treat women and the young? How do they get people back into jobs? And how do they improve living standards? But one of the last things we look at as well is how do they then persecute those minority groups in Nazi Germany? So we do look at, how they treated the Jewish people, disabled people, how they look, the many other different minority groups as well. And we look at some key events from the period 33 to 39 of how quickly they not only were able to get people on their side, but also how they took away people's rights and took away people's freedoms as well. So they're the 4 topics that we look at. Now, what qualities will you need to be a successful historian? Well, we're looking for enthusiastic, well-motivated and hard-working students who are willing to get involved in the subject, both in class and for homework. You'll have a love of writing, and as this is a written-based subject, you will be required to write at length, but please don't worry about that. You are going to be supported just like you are at Key Stage 3. You will be supported at Key Stage 4 as well, at being able to develop your writing. You will need to remember key facts, dates, events and people, so you will need to be committed to spending time revising these and being committed to reading around the topics that we will study. And in return, the qualities that you will get from this and the skills that you will get from this is you will become a historian who has a broad and deep knowledge and understanding of the past and how it has shaped the world today. You're going to be curious about the past and confident in challenging ideas. You'll be able to, challenge questions and challenge people by sort of bringing in your fantastic knowledge and understanding that you will build up during the GCSE course. You'll be able to explain and analyse historical events and periods studied using a wide range of knowledge and skills. You're going to analyse, evaluate and use sources to make judgments in the context of historical events. You're going to evaluate different historical interpretations. So you're going to look at what different historians have said about key events, and you're going to think about how and why they think like that, but also why they differ as well. You're going to be able to make links between different time periods, identifying changes and continuities over time, and you're going to be confident in being able to communicate your ideas using key academic language. So that's what you're going to be able to get from this course. So where can it lead to? So history leads on. So studying history at GCSE can lead on to A-levels and further study at university to support careers in a vast range of areas. Here's just a small selection of where history can take you. So archaeology, museum work, journalism, economics, politics, teaching, librarian, historian, archivist, researcher, law, TV and film, police, armed forces, and the civil service. So lots and lots of different jobs there, and a huge variety as well. Okay, and that's just a small selection that I've just picked out as well. So history is seen is a traditional GCSE. People really do see it as a fantastic thing on your CV or whatever. People look at it and go, wow, this person has worked really, really hard, because like I said, it is still seen in as a very, very important GCSE and qualification. Now, I'm just going to quickly go back to how is history assessed at GCSE. So it is broken up into 3 papers, and as you can see on the screen here, so paper 1 is 75 minutes, your paper 2 is 105 minutes, and paper 3 is 80 minutes. Each paper has 6 questions, and as you can see there, the marks that are available and also the percentage that each paper has towards the GCSE. But I don't want you to worry too much about this, because you're going to be fully supported, and by the end of your GCSE you're going to be so familiar with each exam paper and the different the different question types for it, how much you might have to sort of write and how much time you'd have to spend on each question. All of that you're going to have, it's going to be built up over time, so I don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, but what I want you to think about is, the topics that we study, the skills that you're going to get from this, but also where it can lead to as well. Okay, now if you have any further questions, you can email me. The email is on the screen, jfotheringham@oiea.co.uk. So thank you very, very much for listening. And like I say, history is such a fun and interesting subject. And I really do hope that you really think carefully about history and would like to pick it. So thank you very much.